Okay, cool. So today, the topic of the lesson, what I wanted to do was strong and weak squares. I know that I promised something about bad and good pieces, minor pieces and stuff, but to be fair, it's a little bit more tough to prepare, and I realized a little bit late that we have the lesson today. So I decided to go for this topic instead because I think it's also an important topic that we kind of touched upon a little bit in the past, but haven't maybe had a dedicated focus session.
Yep.
So we
We
will
have so
be
many topics to cover that we should be fine.
yeah, indeed. So what we will do, like we will take a look at the, first we'll start by defining what strong squares are, obviously, although that's kind of self-explanatory. Then we'll take a look at some techniques of creating those strong squares, and then also how to utilize these strong squares. And then we'll, like, by either maneuvering a piece there or by exchanging the defenders of this piece and then utilizing it. And then last but not least, we'll also deal a little bit with the topic of how not to overestimate the strong squares, or what are some of the resources when you are faced with, when you have a strong square for your opponent or a weak square, and how you can maybe fight against it, or how you can annul the advantage or its existence. So okay, in this first example, it's very just basic for the definition of the strong square. Like, strong squares or outposts are squares that can be defended by opponent's pawns. In this case, the squares d5 and e4, and also often the pieces, right? Because in this particular case, we have a bishop that doesn't have any influence, can never attack these two squares in particular.
Yep.
And also, these squares are often supported by your own pawns. For example, this square c6 is nominally also a weak square, but your knight there is a little bit less stable than on d5 or on e4. So
Yep.
here, yeah, like after some knight c3, you are planning to occupy one of these squares, and then your knight will be very, very strong, and you can take further action from there. I hope that's clear, right?
It is. It certainly is.
Yeah. Okay, so one technique, like, of creating strong squares is simply like strong squares are often created when it comes to as a consequence of some pawn moves releasing the pawn tension. So often we use pawns for fighting for the squares. So one of the common techniques is simply exchanging a pawn in a way that the opponent can't recapture with another pawn, most notably sometimes even a piece, and then control the remaining square. So if, for example, there was black pawn on either c6 or e6, then they would take the pawn back and control the square, but here it's not possible, and here with your next move you have freed the square on c4 for your knight, and that's like one way you can create a square for your piece, right?
Mm-hmm.
The other way is exchanging or undermining the defenders in the pawn structure. So, for example, we can see here that this f6 pawn is kind of the only defender of this g5 square, right?
Yep.
And simply by distracting or deflecting that pawn, by taking on e5, gives you the g5 square for the knight. So you are able to, because now the g5 square can be defended by any other pawns. All right. Similarly, sometimes, like, this is another example. Like, for example, in this particular case, we can see that our square on d5 is potentially a very nice square. And the only pawn that's defending is this pawn on c6. So what we do here is we try to deflect b5. Yeah, b5 removes the defender of this square, and irrespective if black doesn't do anything, like if they take, then you recapture with either pawn and jump in the next move. If they advance, you jump immediately, and if they don't do anything, then you take and then jump again, and that's how you exploit the square. Mind you, sometimes it's not even sufficient for a decisive advantage, but we are not talking about the technique. And note, by the way, that this is all possible because this pawn here is on b6. Yep. If it were on b7, this wouldn't have been so powerful because then black would always be able to recapture on c6 with the pawn. Okay. Another very common technique for when it comes to fighting for the strong squares and outposts is exchanging the opponent's pieces that are defending it. Okay, so we have seen some of these examples. If you remember that famous game Fischer with Fischer Gadia, I think we'll have some similar examples later in the road. But okay, basically, let's say in this particular case, if black plays something like b6 or whatever, because it's black to move, then white will gladly take the knight, because the knight is the only piece that is defending the d5 square. And after this exchange, you simply plant the knight inside, and you have a very nice piece that can never be removed by any of the pieces nor pawns. Note, by the way, that
go ahead.
yeah, sorry, what did you have a question?
No, I shouldn't read the titles of the exercises. I was just thinking why the strong square isn't as strong.
No. I mean, it's just that's just disregard the titles, so to speak. So another thing that I want to emphasize on this example, just as a for example, it is very, very important to understand that strong squares are usually it is desirable to occupy them with pieces and not pawns. So for example, in a position like this, jumping with knight d5 would be extremely bad, because then after knight d5, e5, you have occupied the strong square with the pawn, and the pawn is usually less powerful there than the piece. Piece is much more centralized. In this particular case, you still do get the e4 square, and maybe you can get in the king. It depends on the specific position. But for example, if you are white here, it is better to try something like bishop h4 to exchange the defender than to jump in prematurely and then allow the blockade of that strong square by the pawn, by your own pawns.
It reminds me of a Sveshnikov structure where black basically wants to get white to recapture on what is it, d5 for the pawn. I mean, in that case, it's to protect his backward pawn, I suppose. But
yeah, indeed. Although there are some cases in those where that capture on d5 leads to the transformation that's favorable for white, because then they get queenside pawn majority. I mean, once again,
I didn't study this Sveshnikov.
Yeah. I mean, this is also common in some English attacks of neithers, but. Yeah, so this is why I said overestimating strong squares, because in an example like this, if black plays like knight g8, keeping this important knight, and then after this exchange, sure, you still have the nice square, but you can't do that much with it. You are, so okay, black needs to keep the knight here controlling that square potentially, but that's why the title is overestimating strong squares, because d5 looks nice, but it's not super clear whether your knight will, how much it can do. Okay, so another example that showcases like what we can do with strong squares. We can sometimes, in majority of these examples that I showed so far, it was quite obvious what the strong square is and how to occupy it. But sometimes it's not super so easy. So especially in certain positions which are relatively static or stable, one of the best plans actually combines the idea of improving the worst place piece and by embarking on a journey to send it to occupy the weak square. So in this first particular example, like this knight is kinda outplaced, not ideally placed, and this d5 square is kinda strong. So white plays knight d2 and goes knight f1, knight e3, knight d5. And it's important to note that black can't prevent it. For example, if this pawn was here or here, I don't know, just for illustrative purposes, then black sometimes has this idea bishop g5 with the idea of simply exchanging the piece before it gets there. So that's also a common defensive motive, but here it's not possible because the pawn is on f6, so white is able to simply complete the maneuver, and then this is like a mini plan. If you remember what we talked about, mini plans. Okay, get the piece to a strong square and then take it from there. You don't need to figure out already here how having a piece on d5 will benefit you and what will be your next.
No, it's an improvement, and take it from there.
Yeah, exactly.
Is there any particular reason you would play knight d2 and not knight e1? c2, d3?
No, yeah. I mean, maybe even knight e1 is more precise because it keeps the d5 open. Yeah. Okay. Sure. There are multiple routes.
Yeah, I know it's not.
I think there is
the main point, but I was
those are equivalent indeed. Yeah. Okay, and last but not least, like this is the example of when we had a situation where a strong square looks nice, but it's actually not that significant because we see that we have the knight, but it's not attacking anything, and black can play bishop e6 because black still has the white square bishop that's fighting for the square. And as I said, like if you do nothing, then this is particularly not desirable. Maybe sometimes it is, but maybe in this endgame not. Like in some middle games, once again, this is Sicilian structure, and then this pawn majority can become relevant. In this particular case, not really. And if you retreat the knight to b4, then even a5 comes, and then the knight is pushed away even further from this square, and okay, black is kind of fine here. Maybe even more than fine, because this pawn is also hanging.
Snap off the pawn,
Yeah. So yeah, like in general, a lot of chess and positional chess revolves around exploiting weak squares, detecting them, maneuvering around them. There are like opening variations where the entire battle revolves around it, like neither of positional lines of the neither of they're all about this d5 square. Also, but also like King's Indian is e4. So knowing what the around which squares you should fight in the opening actually is a central theme often in these openings, and helps you understand the opening better if you know which pieces to keep, which pieces to exchange. It kind of all ties together. Okay, I hope this is all clear. Are there any kind of questions about the first part of the lesson?
No, certainly not. Yes, it's certainly clear. No questions.
Sure. Okay, so then
I think it ties in nicely with basically the control of the open file we discussed earlier.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's clear, and I'm already curious about what tortures you have for me in the exercises.
Yeah, well, we have 10 exercises for you to solve as usual. If you don't, what we don't do in class, we'll do for homework, and I'll give you feedback later, and I'll try to dig some additional exercises because, I haven't checked whether there are some more devoted to them in Steps method. I also have some from my games, like literally this is a topic where you can find endless mountains of material, even more easily than some other topics. Anyway, let's dive with the first one. It is black to play. How would you continue? Maybe we can also use the opportunity to try some evaluation skills.
Yep, thank you. Let's see, so materials even. Pawn structure is about the same. I wouldn't think king safety is that different. Given the topic of the lesson, there's one idea that immediately comes to mind, which is bishop takes b3, allowing the knight to land on d4. And with that in mind, I would say black is better. White's bishop is obstructed by his own pawns. It can come to the h3 c8 diagonal, but I'm not sure if it's doing that much over there. While black's knight will, other than immediately threaten a pawn on b3, it threatens a fork on the rooks, and it really limits White's movements, or at least controls a lot of squares in his camp. I'm trying to see if I see other candidate moves. So in these structures, what comes to mind is, or what I always want to check is, can I play f5? Not sure if it's correct, but
well, that's actually a legit point, because now you kind of know the topic of the lesson.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
But
if I wouldn't, it's a move I would look at.
Yeah, but as we discussed earlier, and that's a good thing. Like one way or one common way of approaching the position, or very thematic plan / mini plan, often involves looking at your pawn breaks, right?
Yep.
Like f5 is definitely f5, d5. There are moves that should be considered, at least partially. But here f5 fails relatively trivially, apart from it being less strong than the move you suggested. But there is actually a much more concrete problem with f5. Can you see?
If I see it already.
It kind of fails tactically.
Yeah, of course. The bishop is opened.
Yeah. Yeah, that's by the way instructive. Like, even if we disregard now the whole existence of bishop b3, and if we disregard the fact that this drops a pawn, because f5a, f5b, like this probably has queen pawn. The only even if it doesn't happen, and let's say we just reach this position, okay, but what has our break exactly achieved? Because many people are like, oh, I see a break, let me just go for it, push the pawn. But then you're like, okay, but what exactly have I've just opened my bishop. Like, what's my follow-up? I don't have a,
Exactly.
Yeah, so once again, it should be considered, but it should be also relatively quickly discarded.
Yeah.
Okay, so can you give me a concrete line after bishop b3, cb3 that's kind of powerful? Because you don't...
Bishop b3, cb3, knight e6. I guess something like rook a to c1. c6.
Okay, let's say b4, let's say.
b4.
And just to move the pawn from hanging.
Yeah, then knight d4.
And how do you evaluate that?
Better for black. Better for black. I can't say if it's +1 or +5, but it's definitely better for black.
Yeah, I think
and
it's
easier to play.
It's closer. Yeah, that's also far more relevant evaluation. I don't think it's +5, but I think it's closer to +1 to +5. But once again, I don't think it's necessary when you're evaluating a position to think in terms of computer evaluations.
No.
It's more like, I mean,
I generally don't.
Especially when there's like, because you said something that's very important. It's easier to play for black. Just one thing that I wanted to mention in the context of the lesson, it's very important to play knight e6 immediately, because if you hesitate for a move, then maybe bishop h3 comes, and then
Yep, then snaps it off.
Yeah, then they don't allow you to reach the d4 square. So that's why knight e6, and yeah, I mean here you can, like, once again, you don't need to even maybe even c5, but c6 is probably safer. Before, like, you don't even need to see a concrete follow-up. You just know, any grandmaster will be like, oh my god, I get my knight to d4, and then the position plays itself. I can play b5, I can play a5, I can open up my rooks, I can bring the king, I can at some point play g6, f5. Like, this knight is such a monster that black is always like, you're not risking anything, and you can only play for a win.
Yeah, I would think white would like to give up his rook for that knight, to be honest.
Yeah, ideally yes, but you would at least want to get a pawn. But
yeah, true.
But yeah, like, this kind of ties, I mean, to the desired topic of the lesson that I wanted to have. Like, if you have a better minor piece, that's already more than enough for almost a decisive advantage, especially in a practical game.
Yep.
Like between two humans, right?
Yep.
Like, it's
if you don't blunder like I often do.
Yeah, I mean, sure. All things being equal, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, that was very good. Let's gonna go with this one. Let's see what you have here.
So let's see. Black has a rook and a pawn for 2 pieces. So it's quite an imbalance. And he has a better pawn structure. At least, if I count pawn islands.
Okay, yeah, from that context, yeah.
There's a strong square on f6, and black's king is more unsafe than white's. At least it feels that way, given all the holes around it. And trying to assess.
So first of all, let's maybe try how do you evaluate this position given the imbalance?
I would say white is slightly better. That's mostly because I don't see any active plans for black. He's very cramped, so perhaps he can do something with pushing his pawns on the queen side, but it's not very clear. While white has a clear idea of or at least can start calculating attacking the king, I suppose. I'm trying to see, if I see a square like f6, I want to put my knight there. Before considering if it's good or not. But I don't see a clear route there. All the excess squares seem under control by black.
Yeah, if the h pawn wasn't on h5, that would be definitely something to consider, indeed.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
That's actually a good point when you are dealing about these, like, squares and outposts. How easy it is to that's a good observation, that you should check whether you can get a piece there or not, and how easy it is, yeah, or if it's possible at all.
So I know you told me not to sacrifice too much, but it feels very tempting to at least calculate some bishop take h5 or knight takes g6.
No, I didn't tell you not to sacrifice too much, and I tell you not to make sacrifice for the sake of sacrifice just because it's an exercise. I told you to, I wouldn't be a good coach if I advise people not to sacrifice, but...
Sacrifices are a weak point of mine. So let's see.
I mean,
at least last lesson you told me not to sacrifice pawns for no reason, which is fair. So c5 is another sort of okay square, but black just takes it, I assume, and your pawn structure is ruined. So perhaps one of the plans that comes to mind is playing knight h4, opening the rook. I'm assuming he would play something like bishop e7, protecting the f6 square and attacking the pawn. Because if he doesn't, I kind of want to play rook to f6. No, but if he attacks it then I'm nowhere still, so it doesn't work.
Yeah, maybe try. So we have kind of.
Yeah, I'm struggling.
Yeah, we have kind of concluded that that this, like, okay, given the topic at hand, but also we have concluded that currently the only weak square is kind of f6, and potentially c5, but c5 is not really a weak square because they always have b6. So we said
exactly
those that are not protected by the pawns, but is there maybe a way in which you can try to create one?
Yes.
And that is, I mean, yeah, but
it has to be the only correct answer.
Yeah, that's a very clever. I mean, I expect a follow-up question. How?
Yeah. I was thinking. So perhaps e6, trying to get the e5 square. So if he takes knight e5 and then the g6 pawn is hanging, so that kind of looks nice. And if he doesn't take, he doesn't want to allow e takes f with check. One of the reasons is the discovery on the f file. And if he plays something like f6, you just snap it off as well. So e6 looks like a good candidate. Is there something I'm missing there? e6, f takes e6, knight e5. If he tries to protect the pawn with his king, then you have rook to f7.
Yeah, true. Or if they play, what if they play something like, okay, actually bishop d6 maybe can be considered.
Yeah. But then I can just take the g6 pawn, right? This king.
Yeah, I mean.
His h5 pawn is hanging.
Yeah, I mean, you have to probably evaluate bishop h2, bishop h5, but I think it's you know, now the I mean king safety becomes I mean you are just being I mean you are exchanging, like, yeah, indeed e6 is the move here. I mean, to be fair, let me just retrace my steps. So I think you were way too modest in your evaluation of white here, because you said black has white has two pieces for a rook and a pawn, and that's nominally, I mean, it's usually, I mean, you know, if you count pieces 3.5 or whatever, but it's nominally in white's favor, such a material imbalance, in many cases. Especially since you detected that here black has no plans, there are no open files for the rook, rooks are very passive, and white has some space advantages, some very active pieces, and potentially some play against the weaknesses on the king side. I do want to mention that the king safety is usually, or in many cases, not the most important factor when there are not queens on the board, but it has to be mentioned. Like, I wouldn't overemphasize it here, but it is a little bit relevant, yeah. So here, even some quiet move like bishop d2 amounts to an enormous advantage for white. I think it's like +5, maybe +4, whatever. Like, it's huge because you are basically fighting against the c5 square. And even if, let's say we get something like this, just for the sake of it, like, even if you do something like this, yes, you have spoiled your structure, but then like rook b1 comes at some point, then bishop d4 comes, and you are once again very much rock solid, and your pieces are better than the opponent. And there is no way he can open any files here, basically.
No, that's. I think my modest evaluation is inexperience in these positions.
Yeah, we
especially playing two pieces against a rook.
Yeah, we haven't devoted too much emphasis on imbalances at this point. But yeah, like it's this is like pretty much winning for white, and indeed e6 is extremely powerful.
It is, like, and once you gave me a subtle hint, it really stood out.
Yeah, because you noticed correctly, like, if the pawn was like back here, then probably some knight h2, knight g4, knight f6 is extremely powerful. But here you can't do that, right? And yeah, knight h4 is kind of in the wrong direction. I don't know where this knight is going, to be completely honest here. I mean, to be fair, even like some neutral move like h4, just, once again, this position is so good from practical perspective, but since we are in OS, and then it kind of, we should focus on kind of the thematic or the best move, and that's definitely e6, because after f e6, knight e5, this is weak, you have opened the f file, this knight is super powerful, and yeah, this is just extremely good for white. And even if bishop d6, maybe, I mean, I don't know, maybe rook f6, maybe, I think knight g6 is just the simplest, to be completely honest, and yeah. You control the f8 square, maybe I'm not, but I think it's you take on h5 next, and all your pieces are dominating. Although I wouldn't be too sure about bishop. The reason I don't like something like this is then rook f8, and then they are starting to utilize the open f file. It's still probably good for you, but I would rather prevent the activation of the rook here by knight g6 and bishop h5, and try to keep my knight here, so that the only file is controlled by my pieces.
Yep, by us. Yep.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So yeah, we have seen here it even, sometimes it wasn't mentioned in the introduction, but sacrificing your pawns to free the important squares is also very good.
Yep.
Is a common technique. Okay, this one now we for homework. This one is interesting actually. How would you continue here? Now we have a set of exercises revolving around the d5 square, which I think is very nice, very common.
Let's see. Materials equal, though black has the bishop pair. Not too consequential in this position as it's quite closed. Black has more pawn islands and a backward pawn on d6. So I would say white is better. So what I want to prevent is that black gets d5 in somehow. I don't think it's possible yet, but and I want to plant my knight there, but I want to exchange his bishop first. So the easiest solution looks to me playing bishop d5, and it's pinned to the king, so we can't move it. If he takes, I take back with the knight. If he doesn't, and plays something, I don't know, rook c7, trying to double or something, you just snap off the bishop, queen takes back, and knight d5, and it can never be taken away. Right now checking if I'm missing something from this rather obvious plan. No, I don't think I am. I would say that's my answer.
Bishop d5, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's correct indeed. You said that the bishop pair, that the position is not open, or not very open. I might disagree a little bit there. I mean, it is kind of open, but the fact that you don't have a bishop pair is compensated by black's pawn structure, basically. And also, and also the fact that this bishop is like if you imagine bishops here and here, I mean, there are some diagonals for them.
Right.
Just the circumstances don't allow them to use those diagonals. Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, you're correct to note that there is a backward pawn on d6. And in this position, like, it's not so easy for white to exploit the weakness of this pawn. But there is like a saying, and the advantage of the backward pawn is not only that the pawn is weak, but the square in front of it is weak.
Yep.
So indeed, I mean, to be fair, even just doing something nothing like rook d3 or rook d2 and then trying to double and just normal moves, it yields white big advantage because white is simply because of these positional factors. And as you correctly noted, black doesn't have enough pieces controlling d5 square to get any sort of d5 at any moment. And also b5 is another idea that they would like to do, but they just can't. I mean, it just drops a pawn. And indeed, now the question is, okay, we can also occupy the square. And indeed, if playing bishop d5 is stronger, because then we end up in a scenario where we basically by force have this knight against this bishop. You could, I mean, in some cases it's also possible to play knight d5, but then you kind of enter the opposite covered bishops, and it's, you know, I think you would much rather have knight in this position because it's kind of close position, and yeah, after king h8 here it's not super clear where is your follow-up. It's not so easy. I mean, white is still better, but it's much better to have the knight that influences more, you know, it has more influence over the both white and dark squares, basically, and it's much more powerful. It can go to e4 to pressure d6, and so on and so forth, yeah. Another thing that's important to note here, you almost never want to take with the pawn. That this would be like a catastrophe. I mean, maybe not a catastrophe because you still have knight e4, but
yeah, but
not desirable.
So much.
You are opening the c5, you are shielding the d4 pawn. This pawn might become weak in some cases, like something like this, and I don't know. Like suddenly you have to think about defending this pawn in some cases, right? It's not so. Yeah, that's definitely, like, once again, we want to most of the time occupy weak squares with pieces, not pawns. Let me just add the separator to the exercise. So yeah, so that you have yeah, this one you'll get for homework. Okay, so all right, now it's a very similar exercise to, okay, it's not similar exercise. This is another exercise that's kind of interesting. It's how would you continue here? It's white to move.
See. Equal material. So black is a little bit cramped, it looks, but nothing too major yet, I think.
Yeah, but let's try to do the evaluation thing again.
Yeah, yep.
So king safety
so
material.
I would say white is better. Black is a backward pawn on d6. White can play against weak square on d5.
Okay, can we do it in a more structured way? Like, can we start with you know, king safety, material?
Materials equal.
Okay.
King safety, I would say, is about. White's king is a little bit safer, but I'm not sure if it's really a factor in this game. Given that black doesn't have a lot of pieces around his king, but I mean, knight f6, it's not too hard to get pieces there. Both players have equal amount of pawn islands, but yeah, black's d6 pawn is weak or backward, and the a pawn is isolated.
Yeah, white has better pawn structure for sure. Yeah. What about the piece activity?
Yeah, that's where the crampedness comes in. White's pieces are better. White's bishop can easily activate via h3. His knight has potential, while yeah, basically the heavy pieces of black are basically in each other's way, so it's hard to find decent squares for them. If you ask me where would you put the black rooks, if you could put them anywhere on the board, it's not too easy for me, other than perhaps d4, but they're never going to get there. So I'm looking first at knight d5, but black can very easily trade the knights, and then you've lost your beautiful outpost for your knight. Bishop h3 is another move that comes to mind. It pins the knight so you can exchange it and then put the knight on d5, which makes more sense. f4 is another move I would consider, given that I am more active, so I would, and black's king doesn't have many pieces yet. f4, I suppose, even after ef4, queen e4, knight f6. I might have knight d5 there. Takes check. Not sure if it's a decisive attack or anything, but it's interesting at the very least. So let me knight d5 immediately. I would disregard, given how easy it is for black to play something like knight b6, and then I would likely retreat my knight because I don't want him to trade it. Bishop h3. Let me think. He can't close the diagonal. f5, just snap it off. So he can't really prevent me trading his knight for my bishop, or he has to give up an exchange for it, which I'm not sure would be very helpful for him. So bishop h3, say rook to c7, I don't know. Or even bishop h3, knight b6, bishop takes c8, queen takes c8. I don't see. Then I'm starting. Then I will just open up the position with something like f4, or put my heavy pieces on the d file, or it's not worth giving up an exchange for black.
And if you play bishop h3 rook c7, what's the deal there?
I take bishop takes d7, rook c takes d7, I think, and knight d5, and he's never going to touch my knight, and I have all the time in the world to improve my pieces, while black is very cramped and has trouble doing so. I'm not sure what the plan afterward would be, but I think it's a decent mini plan at least.
For sure.
So I only want to check if f4 might be stronger than that. Given the topic of the lesson, I'm not sure, but
yeah,
I want to be able to evaluate.
It's good. It's good to be open-minded during the lesson,
exactly.
because in the game you don't know the topic of the game.
No, exactly. So f4.
It's actually an instructive moment to understand f4.
Yeah, because it's not intuitive for me. So f4, e takes f4, queen takes f4, knight to f6, because he has to protect the f7 pawn somehow, and f6 looks really ugly. Not only exposing all the light squares, but it creates so much weaknesses. You wouldn't play that. So knight f6, and I'm checking first. Yeah, I do have knight d5 there, because if knight takes d5, queen takes f7 check, king h8, I can even just take back queen takes d5 and keep the backward pawn a target, and I won a pawn. I'm not sure if there's anything stronger there, but white should be better. So I feel like I'm missing a resource for black. f4, what if he doesn't take? What if knight f6 immediately? And if I take, he takes back with the d pawn, and I helped him remove a weakness. And if I play f5 instead, I'm not sure how I'm going to attack him, to be honest. Because all of a sudden his king is quite protected, and it's not easy to get my heavy pieces in there. Yeah, so I think black shouldn't take, just play knight f6. And yeah, so bishop h3 is a better move.
Is that final answer?
It is.
Okay.
It is.
Yeah, okay, so it's very interesting. I think you were pretty much spot on. I maybe disagree a little bit with some stuff over f4. But yeah, first of all, knight d5, what you said is indeed correct, because then knight b6. And yeah, probably either including bishop h3 here or going back or something is better, because I mean, you can theoretically allow this, but once again, you are getting in a scenario where it's opposite covered bishops, where you do have the outpost, but remember what we said earlier about overemphasizing the outpost. What are you doing from there, right? It's not, due to the opposite covered bishops, you can only attack white squares. This pawn, it will never be, as long as the bishop is defending it, you can never get it, maybe with some tactics somewhere, but that black is not falling for that. And yeah, you are also exchanging pieces and you have more space, and so you don't necessarily, or exchanging the wrong pieces. Maybe black can now play a5, a4, weaken this here, so this is not so good.
Yep.
It's still maybe playable, but not so good. As the move bishop h3, because that's like it's simple chess, right? Like your bishop is restricted, the knight is good, and also the knight has some potential maybe to get to d4. Remember that as well.
Yep.
And with this move, you are simply eliminating this possibility, and you have a dream scenario with good knight versus bad bishop. You don't even need to see what happens next. You can take all the time in the world to slowly improve, and something will pop up at some point.
Yep.
Now with f4, it's a legit move, but in these types of positions, like first of all, it does weaken your king a little bit. Mm-hmm. Secondly, you are helping black, because after ef4, the move you gave queen f4 is not so good because of simple knight e5. And I mean, now you're defending this, and you have given your opponent a very good square, right? So what you have done, that's not desirable. You should probably take with the g-pawn. But suddenly, rook e8, and then they double, then knight f6. And okay, you still have some advantage, like for example, rook e1, knight f6. I don't know what goes on here, but it's much less pronounced, because also don't remember that you have removed an obstacle on the diagonal. So here with the pawn on e5, they have this bishop is kind of dead by their own pawns, and here you have removed one obstacle. So maybe somewhere in the future g6 bishop g7 might come, and suddenly their bishop should be activated. And I'm not saying, like, once again, it's not like white is worse here, or even the white still has a clear advantage, but suddenly the character of play changes significantly. It is much more double-edged, and black has some prospects, like some ideas, right? So some potential of something, right? Like irrespective of how good it is or bad, but at least they because here in a position after bishop h3, they can't do anything. They can just wait, slow that.
There's no idea for black.
Yeah, like they can go f5, but that just weakens them. This knight is killing them. A5 is maybe only hope, a5, a4, and then, but it's easily dealt with. And whereas you have all the time in the world to do whatever you want. So that's not only objectively stronger, but also far more practical. Because in this position, it's the position of the man is it's called for, like strategic approach is called for, and better rather than aggressive approach. Especially because you said in the beginning, yes, the kings are relatively, they are safe.
Yeah, they looked safe, but when I missed knight to e5, it felt like there was something there, which wasn't.
Yeah, I mean, once again, it's not super and it's not super clear. Like once again, here maybe you have king h1, rook g1, but it's really not necessary in this position, I would say.
It becomes when you're playing for two results in the main position.
Indeed.
There's a third result possible.
Yeah, if there was nothing better, then that would be such an approach. Would be, once again, we should consider pawn breaks, but here it's probably not necessary. Okay. Let's go with these two ones. I'll let you do this final four for homework, because I think that's what will. Oh, this one is actually number 10 I really like, but we don't have time for it. I want to finish the lesson with these two pretty thematic positions from the Sicilian. Mm-hmm. So this here, it is white to play for the first time. So we'll see two examples of battling for the d5 square, once from the pushing side, the other from the defending side.
Okay. So let's see. Materials even. White has more space. I
mean, white
to be honest, sorry?
White has more space on where?
Yeah, on the king side.
And in the center, yeah, sure.
Yeah, but not on the queen side, of course. It's very hard for me to judge, because I don't play these kind of positions a lot yet.
I know, but that's why we can. That's why we can use our general skills and knowledge to navigate.
Exactly, but I'm trying to figure out which king is safer, and I'm not entirely sure yet, because, well, white's king doesn't feel entirely safe with the light square diagonal leading to him. But on the other hand, black has pawns around his king, and the heavy pieces can swing over to the king side relatively easy. So yeah, no.
And also, how relevant is that weakness on this diagonal? Like,
No, not relevant yet. They can't penetrate yet.
Yeah, when we are evaluating king safety, we shouldn't be afraid of the ghosts or assume the worst case scenario. Well, like that's like, you know.
Hey, that's my strong suit.
Yeah, I know. Like, you know,
Let me
if
keep
everything goes wrong, everything goes wrong. I think we should stick, like, you know, I mean, yeah, nominal. Like once again, when you're evaluating quick safety, nominally you do see which pieces are directed, whether the pawns have moved and such. But also, you know, it's not in isolation. Like
No, true.
the other positional fixture, like, because in some positions this construction of the king might be weak, but in this position it's. But okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. Please continue, because then I'll hint some other things.
I love your enthusiasm. So in this case, I already had one clear candidate move, which is bishop takes f6, in order to get control over the d5 square. Bishop takes, I suppose, and then bishop d5. A little bit similar as an example we had before, where if he takes, I take back with my knight, and I have beautiful outpost. If he doesn't, I just take his bishop and then move my knight there. I suppose my c2 pawn might be a little bit weak, but I have the option of playing c3 afterwards. But that should be good. So bishop takes f6, bishop takes f6, bishop d5. Say rook a to c8, bishop takes c6, queen takes c6. Let's see, I don't have the immediate knight to d5 there because the c2 pawn is hanging. But I think after something like rook to e2, then I do have the time, and I should be okay. So that would be my answer. Bishop takes f6.
Okay. Yeah, that's actually correct, and this is actually a very interesting example because it was misevaluated by the guys from the steps method a bit. So this is like one of the most classic motifs that arises in the Sicilians, by the way. This idea of fighting for the d5 square and giving up your bishop for the knight, because this leaves them with their bad bishop, and this fights for the d5 square. So we did bishop f6 is correct approach, and now we see that we have better control over the d5 square. And indeed, bishop d5 would be pretty nice. However, the problem here is because I mean, this is where their solution stopped. But after rook a8, bishop to c6, queen c6, rook e2, then there is some queen c4, and then queen c4, rook c4, knight d5, and this is apparently not that powerful because b4, and then you might. You know, it's not so one-sided. Like if they play something like this and you get c3, then it's completely dominating. But because of this b4, I mean, once again, this is like, you know, refining instructive examples with some computer analysis that's maybe not strictly necessary.
Don't I have something like... Oh no, never mind.
I mean, this is
perhaps rook f3, but he just doubles.
Yeah, I mean, this is still perfect. It's kind of fine for white. Like it's okay. But it's not that dominating as you would like, because you know, if they don't do this, if they play some random move, then indeed you take, and then you play knight d5 and c3, and then it's completely dominating. There are many model games. I think one of the most famous ones is Fischer Gadia or something like that, from where very similar scenario happened, and then Fischer played like some rook a1, a4, and just dominated due to this knight. Like there are some Smith-Wolf games. It's like but due to this concrete dynamic approach, this is not the best. But conceptually and positionally, this idea of occupying the d5 square and eliminating the defenders is correct. With that being said, here it's maybe a little bit more precise to play knight d5 because black can't take.
Yeah, he can't take.
And then and then after something, I don't know what even is the best move. Maybe rook c8. Then you play for like some sort of kingside attack, like rook f3 or something like that, queen h3 or whatever. That's kind of the theme, but that's like, once again, maybe not the most best example, but I think it's very instructive as well to see how certain dynamic factors can even affect these positional ideas. But from the conceptual viewpoint, from the topic of the lesson, I think this bishop d5 idea is fully correct.
things.
So and in general, like, okay, maybe, but bishop f6 is the right idea because you basically want to fight for the d5 square.
Yep.
Okay, let's maybe it's penultimate. Maybe I'll actually include this number 10 because I really like it and I want to see you tackle it. This is a similar situation but with black to play. And
Yep.
what would you do here? It's kind of similar to the previous example, but a bit different. So how would you continue here as black?
Yep. So let's see. Material is equal. I would say white's pawn structure is a little bit better because of the backward d6 pawn. King safety, not the main factor here, I suppose. I would say white's pieces are a little bit more active, but not terrifyingly so yet. So what I want to prevent is bishop takes f6 and knight to d5. I think the most easy way to do so is playing b4. At least this first move I'm looking at. Because if knight d5, knight takes d5, and the e7 bishop is protected.
And white loses a piece.
Exactly. And if he moves it away, even playing something like a5, and he will never get access to the. I'm not too sure about that, but I can. Okay, I'm getting ahead of myself there. So b4.
He'll play knight b1, for example.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, actually, let me ask you, what if bishop f6?
Oh, then I just take on c3 with tempo.
Important.
Yeah.
Everything hinges on that tiny little bit detail.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I saw it, but I failed to mention.
Yeah, no. I know. I'm just saying, yeah. Because we are recording the lesson, I'm being more formal than usual.
I'm keeping all my stupid jokes away from you today.
Yeah. I see that you are a little bit reserved, but I'm also, but I'm trying. Lessons are fun.
Oh, they are.
Yeah.
Hi, Vienko, he's great.
I'll cut that part. Anyway, so yeah, okay, so
yeah, that's a good idea.
The question is b4, knight b1, and then what? I guess. I mean,
yeah. So what I would like to do is remove my knight to prevent it from being captured, but I can't really do that. But don't I just have d5 there?
e5.
Knight d5, rook e5.
Oh, sorry. No. If e5, you take with the rook with the tempo on the queen, but d5, bishop f6.
Yeah, that's not what I want. Then no, bishop f6 and just takes on d5. So rook a to c1 is a move that comes to mind.
Okay, let's say
but
c3.
I'm not solving my.
Or bishop f6 and c3.
B takes c3. Or just knight c3, and I helped him. No, knight. A4, knight b1. Bishop takes f6, bishop takes f6, c3, b takes c3, knight takes c3, rook to b8. B3 perhaps.
Yeah.
Not too scary.
I'm even contemplating immediate knight d5, but okay.
Of course,
Yeah.
the squares opened up again.
I mean, you have to calculate queen b2,
Yeah.
queen b2. Sorry, queen b2, knight f6, gf6, queen to h6. But I would be a little bit worried about my king there, personally.
Yeah.
But
making
b3
white's
is
life easy.
Yeah, b3 is a
So
bit.
b4, knight b1. What do I do?
Bishop f6, bishop f6, c3.
No, it's my move.
Yes, he plays c3.
No, I meant after b4, knight b1. I was thinking if I have the better move than rook to c.
That's true. Yeah, that's true as well.
I already kind of discarded rook to c8.
I mean, this is kind of beyond the. I mean, we are now studying neither structure more than a weak
it's
post.
hard.
But yeah, it's still, makes you think.
Perhaps just a5.
Hmm.
Trying to keep his knight out.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know why you so made panicky about c3. I mean, what you did is indeed correct before. That's like once again, no. In this particular case, all the evaluation and everything else is almost irrelevant, because the most relevant question in this position is, okay, what is my white's idea? Takes 95, and can I prevent it? And yes, b4 is the move that prevents it, and that in a practical game that would almost be enough, because okay, I really can't allow bishop f6, like urgent matters are required, and once I play this, then I'll think like whatever. Yeah. I mean, the knight b1, and now here, like, first of all, there are several things you can do. I mean, I think there are many moves here. D5 is perfectly correct, actually. It's a very thematic Najdorf move. Requires some experience because you give up the pawn, but then after something like this, you have tremendous compensation because you maybe get it. You have pressure on the c file. E4 comes, attacks the pawn. Knight is out of the play. C3, A5 or something. Whatever. Yeah, but that's not. I mean, that would be like playing with compensation. But you don't need to even do that. You can play rook a8, C3, A5. Perfectly fine. You can also even play h6 here with the idea of inducing this exchange, but now there is another Najdorf idea, bishop g5. So like c3, a5, I don't know, h3, bishop g5. And another advantage of this is, for example, what you want to prevent in this game is this knight somehow coming to e3 to d5, right? So c3 is covered by the pawn, and e3 needs to be covered by the bishop. And this is also, okay, yes, this bishop is a little bit restricted by these pawns, but it activates via another route, and black is actually slightly better here. Once again, it's a little bit beside the point of this continuation. Like, if you see before, that's like covers the topic
I
of
would play it near immediately, but I want to check if I'm not missing something.
Yeah, like a knight f4, you go queen c6, and then you have pressure on the backward pawn. So okay, maybe queen b5 first to not hang this pawn. But anyway, that's like not the point. Yeah. Okay. And from our last trick today, this beauty of a position. Yeah, the reaction is same. Total chaos on the board.
It's like an exploded view of a chessboard, right?
Indeed, yeah. So yeah, it's white to move. It looks like a total mess, but actually even here, the principle of the lesson that we are talking about can be applied very much.
Yep. So give me a moment to orientate.
Sure, of course. I don't know how we do the drill. Safety,
equal.
Safety, material, structure, pieces.
Materials equal. White's king is a little bit safer because black's pawn shield has been moved forward. So imagine getting rooks to the 7th rank and black's king is feeling not so great. Pawn structure, I would say black has a backward pawn on d5. White does on e3, but it's not easily attacked because it's not on a half-opened file. Not sure if it qualifies as a backward pawn then, but whatever.
E3, no. I mean, yes, no.
Yeah.
Potential weak pawn that can be protected by other pawns.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's hard. Like.
Yep. That's where my hesitation came from. White's pieces are more active. Black is cramped, I suppose, because of the backward pawn on d5, which needs protection, combined with the white space advantage on the queen side. And black's development, I mean, look at that a8 rook, it's not happy. White's g3 knight is kind of looking stupid at the moment. It would kind of want to be on, e5 or d4, probably d4, which will do a lot more than the bishop. Then it's a question of how to get there. And I'm not great with knight maneuvers yet. I suppose something like knight f1, d2, b3 to d4. The route has to be something like that. Oh, there's a great square on g5 as well, by the way. Which knight to h1, brilliant move. f2 to h3, you can perhaps get there if he doesn't play h4 in the meantime.
How does h4 do anything about that point?
Oh, never mind. Yeah, I'm completely mislooking at that position. So knight h1, f3, h3. That square might even be better than e5, given how it's around his king.
Not only that, which square is better protected?
You mean by black?
Yeah, I mean, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, by both sides, but by black.
Yeah, so by black, is the e5 square is a lot better protected.
So what will happen if you get the knight there? I mean, they'll just take it.
Yeah, I was trying to see. Oh, it even misses b8 bishop. Never mind.
Yeah, I mean, it's sad, but it still performs some role, yeah.
Yeah.
And you really don't want to exchange pieces when you because you said they are cramped, right?
Yeah. That leaves knight to h1, which is a really funny move to play. It feels so wrong, but so right at the same time.
Yeah, it's Steinitz. Steinitz was like the first one who discovered this like maneuvering stuff. But yeah, so you correctly assessed everything, I think, more or less. And actually, I'm really happy that this idea was, because I was just about to say that you were looking at these squares in the center, but actually then you corrected the to g5 square. Now, mind you, in this position, even radical measures such as bishop h5 work, because after gh5, queen d1, because of the activity of the pieces, like of development. Once again, it's kind of similar in idea, because you're solving the problem of this knight on g3. In a very brutal way, but the difference in activity of the pieces, the weakness of the king matters, and this is what enables the sacrifice. So yeah, more aggressive player might be inclined for that, but also the plan, and I mean the reason why this is an exercise here is because knight h1 is extremely powerful. And there is like this principle, I think Agard has this 3 questions principle, like what are the weaknesses, what is my opponent's next move, and what is my worst placed piece. And you correctly assess that this knight on g3 is a worst placed piece. And since black's obvious move, I mean, what's black's move? Knight b6, knight c4, you can simply ignore that or whatever. It's not doing much. Okay, maybe it's attacking here, but you don't even really care about so much. I mean, you can always play f4. But yeah, so knight h1 is extremely good. And after knight b6, knight f2, knight c4. Actually you can't even go here, because if knight h3, if they take, you take the bishop on e6, or knight g5 is coming. So they don't even have time to threaten anything, and what you have simply done is you have, while they were losing time getting a knight to a square where it's not doing anything, you have gotten your square to a very powerful square, it's threatening here, and you can simply take it from there. You don't even need to see further.
Yep.
And yeah, it's kind of, once again,
it's pretty.
Yeah, it's like this types of maneuver, like when I first saw them and learned about these techniques, it's leaves a very big like artistic impression, but once again, it's also possible because black doesn't have anything urgent.
No,
they don't have any like, they can go g5, that's just suicide. So you have time in the road because your pieces are, and in this particular case, this is primarily the main thing that works in white's advantage is partly pawn structure, but mainly the activity of the pieces.
Yep.
And you can see that improving pieces and piece play somehow goes hand in hand with exploiting weak squares, because often you need to move the piece around to get to the desired square, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And yeah, sure, you could maybe consider pointing the knight to d4, but it's not as efficient because it takes 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, sorry, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 moves.
Exactly.
And this is 1, 2, 3, 4. And you could make an argument that knight on g5 is much more harmonious. Because if you do something like, I don't know, just make some moves. And,
it took me a while to realize.
Yeah, if you do something like this, okay, but I know it's not so easy even to orchestrate, right? Like something like this. I mean, sure, but now this knight is blocking the bishop. It's not doing as much as on g5, so yeah, I mean, still obviously fantastic position for white, but actually this is much more economical to go to g5. Yep. Okay, so that's it for today. We are finished. Yeah, okay. You have the homework. You only have 3 exercises here. I'll check whether there are some more stuff. I'll try to find either some examples from the steps, maybe extra or something, or some from other sources, so we can you have some homework. And
and if I'm done with these exercises, I just continue with my own step method exercises that I have at home and reading the books. So
I mean you do. I do expect that you are doing calculation tactics anyway. This position of exercise. Yeah, sure. I mean I don't expect them that solving 5 or 10 takes entire week. Yeah, okay, I'll stop the recording now.
I would like to spend a little bit more time on reading the books, but that's an ongoing problem.
Okay, I'll just stop the recording now so that we can be more relaxed. But yeah, it was hope you enjoyed the lesson.
I did. I certainly did. And I'm not too afraid of you posting this online.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, it wasn't that bad at all. Okay, so we'll...
It helps me. My face isn't on camera. I would be uncomfortable then.
Yeah, no, I understand. That's okay.
I'm not used to it. I hope I was relaxed enough for you.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm not the most relaxed on camera either, which is ironic, but yeah, sure. Okay, I'll hit stop now, and then we can chat a little bit afterwards. So say hi, YouTube, and okay.